The good news is that, and bad news, is that the collection all went in the first week. So we don't have any books left in stock in this library, but at the back there is a reading list. The books are free to reserve, so please have a look. If anything takes your fancy, just speak to a member of staff and you can reserve it into whichever is your nearest library in Somerset, or indeed Dorset, if that's where you are as well. The little pieces of paper are just for if anybody has any questions. We'll be taking questions at the end, but if you would rather just write them on a piece of paper and give them to me, then I can ask them, or if you just forget questions very easily, which I think a lot of us do, so you can write them down. The event is being recorded, but only this is being recorded, so don't worry about being in the recording. But again, if you'd rather your voice isn't heard, then you can ask me to ask any questions. My colleague John is going to be leading on the interview, but we really see this as an opportunity for discussion. So if you have any thoughts, questions, if something makes you go, oh, I really want to ask that, then please just type up. We welcome questions. But Hannah's going to start with a reading of some of her poems.
I kind of debated quite a bit and cringed quite a lot about how to introduce myself today, because although I've done a lot of public speaking over the years, I haven't really in this sort of aspect done it, and I've spent the last 2 years unmasking. So when you take your mask off, it's quite a lot harder to sort of be vulnerable. And I was kind of powered by my ADHD in a way that covered the awkward autism, but that's now medicated. Also, Dutch courage helped, but I'm 5 months sober, so I can't do that either. So you'll have to bear with me. I'm going to just kind of throw straight into my special interest, which is the book that's at the back there. And I'm probably going to just chuck cards all over the place, so don't worry about that. Mess's Progress is my book. And I thought I would start with the poem, Mess's Progress. At the time of my diagnosis and my daughter's diagnosis and a house renovation and everything else that was like really impacting me mentally, I was in a huge burnout, because you kind of, when you get a diagnosis, although it's validating, you spend so much time with your brain just processing information of the rest of your life with this new lens. So in the middle of all this chaos and walls being smashed out of my house, my builder kept saying to me, don't worry Hannah, mess is progress. And I don't know if you've heard of the term echolalia related to autism. So that's when you repeat something over and over and over again in your head. And that's what I did with the Mess is Progress. And I ended up writing this poem. Mess is Progress. As I shuffle through the spilled contents of my brain, it's too much again. There's so much to remember, so much to even process. My life as I look back, childhood, relationships, the here and now, parenting, adulting, renovating, mess is progress. To have the beautiful home, we first tear down some walls, dig some holes, tip out the old, the mess is progress. Accepting, unmasking and understanding, mess is progress. Unlearning the masked behaviours is realising the damage they've caused. People pleasing, rejection sensitivity, mirroring, trying so hard to fit in, mess is progress. A lifetime of fawning, meeting everyone else's needs or die trying, the mess, so much mess. The revelation that my needs too can be met. Bless this mess and all its progress. So just to sort of touch on a bit more about me and how I came to reading the book. Just after lockdown and when our children went back into school, my teenage daughter's teachers called us in, my husband, no, he's over there, for a chat, and we weren't really entirely sure what the chat was about, and they said to us, we think your daughter's autistic. And I was a bit like, oh, okay, wasn't expecting that. And I did, unknowingly, because I was undiagnosed as well at the time, full deep dive research into like how autism presents in girls, because all I knew about autistic people was mostly what you see on the telly. My nephew's autistic. Also, wrongly, I guess I associated autism with learning disability as well, and my daughter didn't have a learning disability, she was autistic. I went through all of this, and as I'm reading all these books and all these research books, and I was online and doing all these things, the further I got into this, the more I was thinking, shit, this is really familiar. And I said to my husband, I think I might be autistic too. So I decided once we'd finished the process with my daughter that I would go and have an assessment. We were in a position financially at the time to go privately, so that's what I did. I know not everyone has that benefit or privilege to do that, but that's what I did. I also did, through the same process, sort out a therapist to unpack a lot of stuff. And one of the things she told me to do was journaling, because my brain was just so full of information. I couldn't sort of sleep, I couldn't concentrate, it was really affecting my ability to function. So I started journaling, and I'm not very good at being sort of insincere or inauthentic to like who I am as a person, and I found like the daily gratitude really bizarre. I did start with it. I thought I'm going to give it a go, and then I did that for a few days, and then I started writing poems, and I was like, this is really cathartic, and just carried on. Now, one of the things I'm really bad at is starting a conversation. Like, it feels too small talky to me. Like, how do I instigate this? So even when I was on the video therapy session, she was like, what would you like to talk about today? And I'd be like, don't really know. And so I started then reading her a poem that I'd written that week. My therapist was also autistic and ADHD. I specifically sought out somebody that would understand these brains. And after a couple of weeks, she was like, Hannah, some people need to hear these. And I was like, really? She's like, yeah, start a blog, do something. And that's when I started my TikTok. But then in my head, I was thinking, I'm gonna do a book, like Hello New Special Interest. And I went, again, deep dive, researched how to independently publish, and I went so deep into it. As James will probably tell you, I ignored a lot of other things that I probably should have been doing. But the thing is, with a special interest, it's got a really healing property when you focus on something like that, if your mind's in a really difficult place. So although it did keep me busy, it was also part of the process of working stuff out. So that's that. So as I was saying, there's chapters in the book as well as poems, mostly a little bit of my ramblings, but I wanted to sort of, I don't know, your situations, where you are in your journey, if you know somebody that's autistic, or you think you are, or you have a family member, etc. But when I got my diagnosis and read the report, it was a really difficult thing to read, and I was quite surprised because, it's what I wanted. I wanted to understand me. Anyway, this is what this very small excerpt's about. So, when I first read through my assessment report and diagnosis, I cried. So much crying, snot tears the lot. It's no wonder post-diagnosis is a time for grief. And my God, the processing that goes on. I didn't just read it once either, glutton for punishment, this one. Also, there is a constant imposter syndrome. Despite having it all there in black and white, intimate details about my entire life with deficit upon deficit of everything I'm unable to do or struggle with because I'm autistic. It seemed that when my daughter had her report, I could give her the pep talk. These assessments are done on deficits alone, and none of your amazing qualities are listed, so don't be too disheartened. It's more about being in a society that isn't set up for you, rather than you not being good enough for society. I preached it, but I did not practice it. I was grief-stricken. I felt physically wounded, and my heart ached for younger me and all she had endured. Some would argue that she turned out okay in the end. Look how strong you are, etc. But I didn't feel strong. I felt lost all the time, but I carried on regardless. Then the intrusive thoughts began, especially as I read over my husband's part of the report repeatedly whilst crying. Why was he still with me? What did he ever see in me? You name it, I thought it. One afternoon, sat out in the garden, I decided, after going through the conversation several times in my head, I finally expelled the words from my mouth to ask him. The regret started to bubble up immediately. Don't think that one's fine. As I'm so used to keeping those deeply personal and often unsubstantiated thoughts to myself. I felt a bit sick. Am I going to be sick? Oh God, I'm sweating. What have I done this for? Of course, there's a reason I married this man. Although not one for talking too openly about emotions, he managed to diffuse this bomb in my head in one swooping response of light-hearted humour. First, he reminded me that I haven't changed because I have a diagnosis. I'm still the exact same person he fell in love with. Okay, valid point, but maybe you could just write up my good points, you know, like an antidote, if you will. To which he responded, I can, but I'd have to use a single page and a really big font. Okay, this one's called Call Me Crazy. I've always thought I'm a little bit mad, but kept it to myself. I've avoided many things, like sharing that with doctors and stuff like that. I just thought I'm a little bit mental, keep it to yourself, don't let people know. And I've battled with that a lot over the years. When I was 12 or 13, my mum actually took me to the doctors, who unofficially diagnosed me with clinical depression, but because of the stigma, he wouldn't do it officially because he thought it might affect my future prospects, but I was actually riddled with ADHD and autism. So this poem is called Call Me Crazy. When the burnout hits, the spiral starts, existential crisis time back again. Worries about how others will perceive me, and a long life of not knowing or understanding my whole story. It's all internalised, don't act crazy, don't let them see, show them who they expect you to be. But when it's all held in, it makes the spiral deeper. So now with the knowledge, where do I go, what do I show? I have names and reasons for what is happening, but I still hesitate, the fear of rejection ever prevalent. Burnout, shutdown, meltdown, sounds like excuses for what I really am, what I've been called my whole life. Hard work, uncooperative, lazy, emotional, hysterical, dramatic, moody, irrational, disobedient, needy, unorganised, erratic. So many words, and none are right. I'm autistic. The one word that makes it all make sense. The social exhaustion, the sounds and the noises, the struggles for years of not letting the crazy show. So what do I need? Love, patience and understanding. Time to grieve, time to heal. Cuddles and quiet time, soft blankets and low light. My age-old friend, validation. But to receive this, I need to let it out. How do I get past my force field of self-preservation? It's a scary and vulnerable place to be, that my exceptional masking has protected me from for so long. But I'm tired once more. Burnout is back. I can manage this better now that I know I'm autistic. That simple life hack, though it seems so foreign, ask for help. So this one is a little less deep. Social etiquette. I've been told I'm inappropriate quite a lot. I'm not very good at small talk. I like to get straight in with the big guns. But I also have like an internal monologue telling me to reciprocate small talk questions. School run, like if someone asked me how my weekend was, it's like, do I just say good or do I just actually verbal diarrhea and give them way too much information? And then I'll do either of those one things and then I'm like, Hannah, you need to ask them now. And I'm like, because I don't actually care what their weekend was. And I know that seems really mean, but like I'm not really that interested, I'm sorry. So yeah, just say fine, don't overshare. So many autistic people have had this internal monologue while you're having a conversation. So if we glaze over while you're talking to us, it's because we're thinking of what's the right thing that we're supposed to be doing. So this one's called You Look Nice. She compliments me on my outfit, and I graciously accept the kind words, for I was awake early hours overthinking the perfect outfit for the social event. I did not want to wear the wrong thing for fear of judgment, but also I still wanted to kind of look like me. I didn't want to make a wardrobe faux pas, and despite wearing my autistic-friendly ensemble for months now, Lucy and Yak, I actually donned some jeans, a smart shirt, casual trainers, and some of my alternative jewellery. She complimented me on my outfit, and after a thank you, I froze as she began to chatter and smile, because I'm supposed to say something back now, or will it just be like an empty courtesy? For it feels like it would feel like a reaction to her endorsement of my carefully constructed costume. In my mind, she will know I didn't come to this admiration alone, and it's forced, contrived, insincere, so I stand there like a plum. Homage to her attire, I guess there will be none. I don't think she's noticed, but I have no idea what she's said since. It's been several hours now, I'm tucked up in bed post-social, and I lay here overthinking once more. Did I miss the etiquette? My social ineptitude making me wince. Sorry. This is thirsty work. Also, no one likes mouth noises, do they? So, when comparing yourselves to neurotypicals, it's easy to feel like you're a bit useless. And after sort of diagnosis and unmasking and working out who you are and stuff like that, It's looking at yourself through a different lens. So like, we are different, but we're not any less. And actually, they might not be able to do some of the things that we can do. So this poem is called The Can-Do and the Cannots. I can turn my hand to most things. I will try and build, make, craft, write, create, make a business from scratch. I cannot organise my home, tidy consistently, meal plan, remember important things, find my keys, sort out my clothes, know where my phone is when it's in my actual hand. I can fight an injustice, raise an army to join me, talk at length and passionately about the things I'm interested in. I cannot do the small talk. I can hand stencil my bathroom floor over 2 days for a combined total of 14 hours non-stop, but please don't make me queue in a busy shop. It was really funny reading this one back because it's been a couple of years since I wrote these. And in the last, even most recently in the last month, I've discovered stuff about me and my body that I didn't know before. I have never wanted to be a burden, physically or mentally, on anybody. So I've kind of kept it to myself, even when I've had physical pain, or, you know, I don't want to go to the doctor. I've seen people in the workplace, how they speak about other people. I mean, even topically, like Rishi Sunak on the news yesterday doing his talk about people with mental health issues and how they should be in work and not be signed off, you know. So it's that constant feeling like I don't want to be an inconvenience to other people. Since my diagnoses, I'm training myself to kind of fight against this rhetoric that keeps going around in my head. And I've been told I'm hypermobile recently. I've always had really creaky bones, and I've struggled with my knees have been rubbish since I was a child. I literally found that out like a matter of weeks ago. I mentioned in this poem about ovarian cysts. I'm literally having a hysterectomy on Tuesday. So, you know, these things where you tell yourself it's okay, it's, you just need to suck it up, you're overreacting or what have you. But yeah, so I wrote this 2 years ago. It's called The Pieces of Me. Am I a hypochondriac, or do I just feel too much? Not just the emotions, but the pieces of me too. I can feel when the smallest of hairs on my arms moves. It's like tiny creatures inching across my skin. The washing machine belly I so lovingly named, for that fast spin can often wake me in the middle of the night. My ovary is aching. I know when it expels another potential for procreation. A waste of time, dear ovary. Don't even get me started on menstruation. I twist and turn my ankles to stretch them out after a day of use because they ache and are as grouchy as me. The big light is way too bright, makes me feel too heady and squinty. My poor eyes don't like to drive at night. Is that a lump or just a normal lumpy breast? I'll poke it for a while until I can't think about anything else. My wrists hurt and my knees. I remember my knees' misery even as a child. My heart is thumping so loud sometimes I can feel it beating, sometimes skipping and worse still racing. The intense fatigue, why so tired you've barely done a thing, but anything you do manage is exhausting. My ears itch deep within, I can feel my eardrums and I know when they're being stretched thin. I will confess, I am so used to every slight, every pain, but also used to keeping it all to myself. So late at night I will research the possibilities, which result in thyroid, cancer, ovarian cysts, diabetes. Occasionally, when they have reached an absolute peak, I will book an appointment just in case to have my bloods tested. All these years of extra worry for all the pieces of me, when could it actually simply be interoception, hypersensitivity? Because I cannot concentrate on anything else if I'm hungry or need the bathroom. In fact, it can be so stressful if I don't meet these needs soon. It's called Slug and Pillow. If you're like me or my husband and you see pub signs, band names or t-shirt slogans in anything on the road, then that's one for you, the Slug and Pillow. Sorry, I meant to say, this one's about auditory processing and the fact, realising that I don't actually have selective hearing like I was always told. In the past, my family believed I was a little bit hard of hearing, but it turns out I just can't concentrate on processing audio with all the other sounds interfering. If the TV is on and the radio in the other room too, I cannot understand the words coming from you. If I'm writing an email or reading some text, I cannot hear your words or your simple request. But remember that time I said the pillow was loud? You looked at me weird and said it makes no sound. I'll never forget that night. I was trying to sleep on the sofa. There was a slug on the floor and I could hear the damn thing each time it edged closer. Has anyone heard about the spoon theory? So this one's kind of about executive function. Those who haven't heard about spoon theory, a neurodivergent or somebody with a hidden disability or a chronic illness or an actual disability have a limited energy resource, and we expend more energy on everyday tasks, and the spoons represent physical and mental load required for these seemingly simple tasks. I wrote this one when my spoon reserve was very low. It's called showering. I need a shower. My hair isn't so bad, but it doesn't feel clean enough to fiddle with, and I hate having it tied up. But getting in the shower means the following tasks. Getting out of my pyjamas, but it's chilly. Bare feet on the cold tiles, waiting for the shower water to be warm enough before it can assault my skin. Getting cold whilst waiting for it, icy spray catching my legs until it's ready. Stepping into the water, the good bit. The warmth raining down on me, the steam enveloping the room is a misty bliss. Now I don't want to do the chore of actually washing. I don't like when shampoo bubbles get in my ears, and the sooner I start the ritual, the sooner I have to get out. And I'm already thinking about the cold, damp air on my skin prickling at my body hair. The laborious task of toweling dry and still seemingly being clammy to touch. The water in my ears when I'm no longer actually in the water, and then choosing what to wear for the day. Whether I can moisturise, because if I don't have time for it to fully sink in, then it's a no, because the feeling of my sticky body in clothes is too much. Do I have the energy to blow dry my hair? Will it make me too hot? Now I don't want the clothes I chose, because I'm overheating, despite spending 20 minutes scrolling my phone in a towel because I picked it up to get a look at the weather to make an outfit decision, but I forgot what I was doing. Now this one is about empathy. And I forget I'm old, but as an older woman, when I had my autism assessment, I've obviously had a lot longer to learn how to mask and what have you, so I had to do a lot more in-depth questionnaires and different things with the psychologist. And one of the questionnaires he sent me was the empathy quotient. And I was like, I am going to smash this because I think I'm the most empathetic person I know. I cry at the telly, I cry at the news, I had to stop watching the news. If you cry, I will cry. You know, that's the sort of person I am. I genuinely thought I was going to smash it. And then I did it, and there's scores between 0 and 80. And it says 80% of adults with autism score 30 or lower. And I scored 28. And I was like, what? Apparently there's like socially acceptable empathy, which is lying, and autistic empathy, which I'm going to explain in this poem. Empathy curse. I am told I am blunt, intimidating even. I don't mince my words. She says it exactly how it is. I cannot hide if your new haircut looks shit, or the idea you had was weak, I'll admit. But if I see your sadness, I will completely crumble. I will take on that pain. The torment is humble. Physically and emotionally, I feel it all under my skin. The destruction and injustice, my heartache begins. I cry at the hopelessness, the state of our earth. Each infringement, transgression becomes even worse. The news is switched off because I can't bear all the fight as I lay trapped in my mind, the grief stealing my nights. The pain of my loved ones, even strangers too, can be so deep and intense. Oh, the empathy, if only you knew. Yes, I'm autistic and my perceptions diverse, but trust me, they penetrate with this empathy curse. This is actually my last poem. I just want to say I smashed it time-wise. So, parents' evenings and school reports as a late diagnosed autistic and ADHDer. Consisted of things like has potential but talks too much in class. If she could just focus, she could do really well. You know, of average, maybe slightly above average intelligent, but flew under the radar until my own neurodivergent discoveries. And there's a constant feeling of failure, like why couldn't I apply myself like my peers did? Why do I find this difficult? Why am I too emotional and consistently feeling like I'm a bit of a letdown, forever missing the mark? And one of the things that my therapist taught me to do is learning to talk more kindly to myself. So this poem's called Never Quite Good Enough. Never quite understood friendships as young as 4 or 5. Never quite focused enough to learn in school and thrive. Never quite patient enough for the long-winded activity. Never quite clued up enough to understand your hostility. Never quite attentive enough to work out your intention. Never quite disabled enough to trigger an intervention. Never quite well behaved enough to make you proud. Never quite brave enough to speak my feelings aloud. Never quite good enough to achieve what others find easy. Never confident enough to simply just be me. Let me tell you something, you are enough. So change how you speak to yourself. You have learned how to survive. You are enough. Your patience has got you this far. Your creativity has led you here. You are enough. Your compassion has gifted you knowledge. Your growth has taught you boundaries. You are enough. So take pride in who you are, because darling, you're incredible. You are enough. The world needs more people like you, so let your weird shine bright. You are enough. You found your wonderful people, but above all, you found you, and you are the star.
I'm so sorry, that last poem quite got to me, so...
Oh, don't cry, because I'll cry.
I would like to ask one, but can I just have a minute?
Yeah, of course you can.
Absolutely.
Of course you
I'll
can.
come to you first.
Does anyone want a tissue?
I'll come to you first. So your subtitle of your book is The Unmasking of an Autistic Woman. So just for the sake of the room and the recording, what is masking, and how and why do autistic people do it?
Okay.
And is there any difference from the way that autistic people do it to the way that, say, a photographer working at a wedding might have a script that they use as well? Do you know what I mean?
Yeah, I know what you mean. I don't know if I can answer for the non-autistic people.
Well, don't, just answer.
So masking is a form of behaving and acting and appearing in a way that is considered more normal and acceptable to other people. And I think as an autistic person, you either do it consciously or subconsciously. Sometimes you don't even know what you do it. And it's not just something that adults do as well. My daughter masked through school for so long that they told me she was fine consistently when I knew she wasn't. So it's almost like a protective layer in a way where you show them what you think that they want to see. When actually inside it's not like that at all. So does that sum it up enough?
Yeah, sorry, I'm still a little bit wobbly, but I wanted to ask you about the way you kind of talk to yourself with regard to the diagnosis. Particularly sort of I am versus I have.
Yeah. Okay.
So, I mean, I have a chronic illness as well.
Yeah.
And one of the things that I'm trying to sort of unlearn, as it were, is that it's something that I have, but I don't own it, if that makes sense.
Yeah.
How would you describe yourself if you were saying, would you say I have autism or I am autistic?
I am autistic.
Is there a reason that you do it that way around?
I think it just feels to me and I know this is kind of a personal preference. There can be quite a lot of arguments in the autistic community about how you should say this. I personally describe myself as autistic and my daughters as autistic because it's not something that you can cure or take away as a part of who they are. And also, I don't think it's a dirty word, and I think if people sort of take it away from who they are as a person, I think there's an element possibly of shame about it. So it's easier to say you have it rather than it is you, I think, sometimes. But
would you say that it was sort of it is almost like a characteristic of yourself rather than a separate thing?
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah, I would, yeah.
So like
does that answer your question?
Yeah.
Yeah, I would. Yeah.
Yeah, go for it.
In your last poem, right at the beginning, you were talking about getting your report back and reading lots of deficits.
Yeah.
Is there anything about yourself that you really love that you think is intertwined with what autism or ADHD or both bring to you as a person? Is that what about you do you love because of your autism and your ADHD?
Well, I suppose a bit like the can do and cannot poem, like I'll give most things a go if it interests me. If it doesn't interest me, then it's not going to happen. So I think I'm a creative person. I think I'm a compassionate and empathetic person, and I do find it really weird when like the myth of autistic people is that we aren't empathetic, and it's completely not true. And I think that's one of my strong points. Like I can see if somebody else is struggling or in pain. And not to go back to my photography job, but like I did a wedding in January and I could see the bride was visibly struggling with a certain point of the day, and I'm so in tune with that because I'm used to looking out for it in my daughters as well, that I said to her, let's go into another room away from everybody else and just have 5 minutes, and did some breathing with her, and she was just really sort of blown away by it because no one else was, they're all getting ready for the wedding, no one else is noticing that. And I think we spend such a long time watching and trying to understand other people that it's like it's there now. So I think that's a good thing about it.
Following your autism diagnosis, what kind of support did you get or look for? There seem to be lots for high support needs, but not for someone with low support needs, ADHD. Okay,
that's a really good question.
Very good question.
And I think it's a really good question because there's a lot of bad mouthing in the media about people going for diagnoses and people being overdiagnosed, which is just utter rubbish. And it's like there's an assumption that people are doing it deliberately to get extra support and help, when actually there isn't any. There literally isn't any. And the support that I've had since my diagnosis, it's been in my immediate circle. It's not been from the doctors or the government or or the taxpayer's pocket. It's been me seeking help. I think there are some things that you can get help with. At the end of my report is a list of charities and stuff like that. But genuinely, talking openly and candidly with people that I'm really close to has been the biggest support that I've had.
First question in the back row. You can have another one on.
Okay, great. So I don't know if you can answer 2 questions. I'll try.
Go for it. Go.
Okay, so you mentioned that you found out about your autism and ADHD after your daughter was diagnosed.
Yes.
So it's related to masking. So before that, were you aware that there was anything different about you? Were you masking?
Yes.
So that's kind of the first. Do you know what I mean? Like.
Yeah.
And then the other question is, you talk about, wanting to fit in, like like you're always trying to, like the masking process, you try to fit in, try to please people, try to. So I'm trying to understand my daughter's diagnosis.
Yeah.
So I'm learning, and I'm right away, like there's a lot to learn. But so part of me, and this is well intended, this question, is even as a person, so I'm assuming that I do not have ADHD or what I mean.
Yeah.
Even as as we grow up, at the beginning, you always want to please people. Like because you don't know who you are. You want to fit in. You want to be liked.
Yeah.
Irrespective of your ADHD, or, where you are on the spectrum or something like that.
Yeah.
So isn't that part of natural? I mean, I know that we probably have more extreme, but isn't that part of normal life? Like the older we grow, we kind of get confident in ourselves and we say, "This is me, take it or leave it." Whereas when we're young, we're
So that's actually a really good and valid question. So I can't remember where I saw it, but the difference is when you're a child. For example, a child with, say, autistic or ADHD traits, especially girls, don't get recognised for such a long time because they're quite childlike traits all round. So it's an immature trait, and the differences start to come when their peers change and become more acceptable, and that child doesn't. So they're still a little bit quirky and they're still doing this, and then the separation, the divide between them and their peers is becoming more and more obvious. So a lot of autistic traits are seen as quite childlike, and we can, even as autistic women, Flo and I have discussed this before, be I can't say the word for it.
Infantilised.
That's the word, thank you. So I think as children, yes, you want to be accepted and you want to fit in no matter your neurodivergence, but I think as you grow up, not only do you start to notice the difference in yourself, but so do your peers. So I think somebody once posted about how to diagnose autistic people. Follow the bullies, because they're the ones that spot you out first. You know, they're the ones that know that you're different, and I know that's quite sad, but you know, they are, because you stick out like a sore thumb as you get older, and those traits aren't acceptable anymore because you're not a cute 5-year-old.
Really wise.
Really wise.
That was really wise.
Thanks.
Yeah, I was going to ask, so, because I'm going to talk about myself now, because that's sometimes something that autistic women do when they're trying to share an experience. When I was diagnosed with autism and I told people around me, most of them were like, yeah. Yeah, and I was like, could you have let me know maybe before I had to wait ages on a waiting list for diagnosis? And then quite a few people were like, oh no, you're just funny, or you're just different, or you're just weird.
Yeah.
What in your circle of your loved ones and your friends and your family, or like colleagues, or whoever you're around a lot, what did you find their reaction was? Was it what you hoped? Was it disappointing? Was it like difficult for you to tell them?
Difficult for me to tell them, yes, 100%, because I'm not very good at opening up on those sort of things. I wrote a book, told everybody. No, it was difficult telling people. Telling my mum and dad, I found the most difficult. There's quite a lot of information about that in the book. My friends' reactions, and props to all my mates, they were great. I'd already talked quite a lot at length to them about my suspicions anyway, and I'd already talked to them a lot about the process that I'd gone through with Erin. So I don't think there was anyone that disappointed me with their reaction. I feel very fortunate because I built it up and overthought it in my head that it was going to be a lot harder than it actually was. And you know, my mum and dad were sort of like, well, we knew there was something. But yeah, I think there's the odd occasion where, and it's purely through knowledge, where people don't understand it as much, like well, you're just that, and again, I think there's that element of shame around the word autism, and like makes it that it's a bad thing when it's not. Like I even found with my youngest at school when she was really struggling, and the teachers were telling me she's fine, and then it's almost like they didn't want to label her like it was a bad thing, and we probably would come up against labels in the conversation, but for me it's not a bad label, understanding how your brain works, and so I'll proudly say that I'm autistic. I'm not ashamed of it. I don't think that makes me a bad person at all, but I think there's it's getting better, the representation for it. Thanks, Flo. Sorry, this is Flo from the TV programme. Not telling you that. So yeah, so there's stuff on the telly now. There's people writing books. There's people doing TikToks. You know, there's a lot more out there that's making you feel less alone, and I think that's helping sort of filter down to people that didn't understand that it's not a bad thing. Mm-hmm. It can be difficult because society's not built for us, but it's not a bad thing to be an autistic person. Mm-hmm. So I kind of went off on a tangent then.
No, another question back, right? Yeah, go for it.
I think when you tell people, so it's not so much, I'd like to say, like, from my own experience, it's not so much that the people are judging you or saying it's fair to be, well, from my personal experience I would say, it's more because I think, you know, when you think about autistic children, you see, you know, young boys and you can see that they maybe have great learning needs. So then when suddenly, someone you love says to you,
that's the association you immediately make, isn't it?
And the thing is, if you've been high achieving all along, and you've been very organized in our eyes, like you've not appeared to us as disorganized or losing things. So so when people question that, it's not that they are judging you or that they're saying this is a bad thing.
They've got a preconceived idea of what it means.
Like if you struggle and if someone says, I have this problem and I can't find my keys, I can't organize myself, as a parent, you look back and you think, okay, I should have picked up these, but I didn't, because even all your peers, all the other parents from the school say, oh, your daughter is very organized, your daughter is, I never had to take homework to school, nothing was ever forgotten. So it's just that we are also processing it. So
it's a lot of unlearning yourself as a parent. Like when Emmy first got her diagnosis, it was a massive learning curve for my husband and I. We knew nothing really about autism and girls.
Wrap that question into it and bring it back
go on then.
Because it really does line it up very nicely. So this, so you, for example, run a successful business, raise children, you're writing books. Clearly, you're a high-functioning autistic person, aren't you? How useful are those terms? This is picking up on those. So and it picks up on the question that was asked earlier on from the audience
which
as well.
Which just reminded me something.
Which is where autism presents with learning disabilities, there seems to be well-formed societal and social responses to that. But where it appears to be high functioning, as what we used to be called high functioning or Asperger's, there's a different set of ideas around that people, for us trying to process it, or for society trying to understand what that is. And I did do you find these terms like high functioning useful terms or not useful terms?
Not very useful, because actually, so when I got my diagnosis, he said to me, oh, you would have a few years back been diagnosed with Asperger's, but we don't use that term anymore. So I sort of thought, well, why did you say it then? But that's basically what would have been labelled a high-functioning autistic. But the thing is that's kind of giving the impression that I can spend my whole life functioning as an autistic. And I can't, because actually there's days, weeks, sometimes months, when I'm not functioning at all, and I'm rubbish. And I shouldn't use derogatory term about myself, but I can't, it comes in fits and waves sometimes depending on what else I've got going on in my life. When I wrote this book, I managed to write a book, but I couldn't cook, clean, tidy. I mean, I'm pretty poor at that anyway, but it was particularly bad. There was, I wasn't functioning at all. And I think to be able to put that label on somebody means that it's almost like a pressure that they have to function all the time, and you can't, because there's so much outside sources that affect how you function in society, and it's not always going to be easy.
Back to the spoon theory thing.
Back to the spoon theory as well. But also, I think some people say people have higher needs, and I think that might be fair to say they have higher support needs as a general thing. It's hard, isn't it, to get it right, to say the right thing, but I don't think like an actual label like you're a high functioning autistic person is helpful at all.
So picking up on another thing from one of the questions from the audience. And again, this isn't so much about the label itself, but about diagnosis and getting clear about what we're talking about and whose needs we're referring to. Okay. So I wanted to bring up, as neurodivergent terms get spread out in society, there's this phenomenon of people using them in everyday situations, like, oh, I'm a bit depressed today, when they're just feeling sad, or I'm a bit ADHD, or everyone's autistic, aren't they, to some degree or other. And how do you feel about that, and how do we draw the distinction between genuine difference and those traits, capacities, ways of being human that crop up in neurotypicals' lives? And are they muddying the water? Do we need to be defensive over the diagnosed? Do we need to be inclusive about trying to maximise the number of people that we help? Do you know what I mean? something.
Yeah.
Speak into that confused mess.
Yeah,
if you
confused
could.
mess. Honestly,
By which I was referring to,
I know some people,
society, not the way I categorise it.
I try not to give a shit too much about what other people are doing and saying. Like, you can get so hung up on it and people can get really irate about it. Like, just even the chat about whether you want to say I have autism or I am autistic. Like, I say what I want to say and you do you, babes. You know, I don't think it's, you know, if people are flippantly saying, oh, I'm a little bit ADHD or whatever, whatever. I haven't got the time or energy to start getting really irate about it. And it doesn't take resources away from those who actually are diagnosed. And actually, I can't remember what question it was on, I might be going off on a tangent, but you said something about...
Bring me back to the script.
You might have said something... Where are we?
I'm going to ask you the first one next.
Okay, no, it was about... it was about diagnoses.
Yeah.
I might go on...
About the gatekeeping.
I might go on a little bit of a rant about this one.
Have a rant about gatekeeping.
So, the media would lead you to believe that anyone could walk in and get a diagnosis if they want one. Why would they want one if they don't think they already have it? Like, you're not gonna, there are no perks of it. Like, I don't understand why they're doing this. So, and B, that sort of rhetoric that is out there is now making GPs biased against people that need a referral. And what they don't understand is actually, we spend a lot of time researching this before we go in and say we need a referral. You know, the majority of people that probably go in for an assessment have 99% self-identified through all the research that they've already done, because other people don't do that for us. And even as a woman, when we have something wrong with our bodies, we have to go out and find that out and diagnose that ourselves, because we get dismissed at the GP. We're just whinging women. So, you know, we have to arm ourselves with all the knowledge before we go into it. Yes, there will be somebody that does it that doesn't have ADHD or isn't autistic, but it's such a minuscule amount of people. There's no point in putting all these stories out there and having famous people have their, like, jibbing, saying the word, of like what they think about it when they are not even a psychologist or a psychiatrist, you know. So I phoned the doctors when I had a conversation, when I doctor surgery. I'd already been diagnosed as autistic and I was asking for an ADHD referral after a conversation with my private psychologist, and I wanted to go through the NHS because I wanted to try medication for the first time. And my referral got lost for 4 months. And this is a really common occurrence. It's deliberate to weed out, because there's not enough care about dealing with the volume of people that need help, funding, and because of the biased views of the sort of people that are going for these referrals. So, and that happens to so many, not just me, everybody, so many people I know. People online, it's rife.
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 Lovely word. It kind of circles me back to the question. So there aren't many resources. There isn't a lot of help available, particularly if you fall into the ways of being that would previously have been called high functioning.
Yeah.
What do we do? How do we get the resources that we've got to the people who most need it? Do you
There's
think?
not even enough resources for the people that would need higher support needs. There's not even enough resources for them. I've got friends with children who the fight is, excuse my French, fucking exhausting, isn't it? And that's why that's really emotional. It just shouldn't be like that. It shouldn't be like that, and it's horrible. Sorry,
It's okay.
I'm gonna make everyone cry.
It's alright, it's okay, we can get through it, we can roll through this, we can do it.
I can ask a question in the
Fine.
meantime. if it
Yeah,
takes a second.
go for it.
Yeah.
Would you say
Go
that
flow.
quite a lot of the support that you can get, especially as an autistic woman or late diagnosed autistic woman, is with other autistic women or like our community? So where there is a lack of support, there's a sort of home, like in terms of sort of government support and medical support, there's a sort of homegrown community of all of us saying, I've just discovered that when neurotypical people say this, they actually mean this, and you go, oh shit, or we'll all help each other. Do you know what I mean? Or we'll say, oh, I'm really struggling with this, and we'll listen to each other and help each other. So there's support there, but you have to find it.
You've got to find it
inside your community.
In your community. Yeah, completely agree.
Instead of this, I don't know what people are thinking in the media, that we're getting a diagnosis and then suddenly getting put up in 5-star hotels.
I know. Yeah, bring it on.
That'd be great.
Bring it with a bit of extra cash and a nice house.
Lucky us.
Yeah.
But there is that support out there. It's just internal and sort of DIY and organic.
Yeah, it is.
Yeah.
Yes.
I don't know that this is a question really. I'm just really speaking because I can't think of what I want to ask you.
Go for it.
Basically, what you've said has hit a lot of alarm bells.
Okay.
For me.
Yeah.
My friend understands this.
Oh, good friends.
As a child, like you say, I think you said, this is part of the problem, isn't it?
Yeah.
As a child, I was told I lacked confidence. I could do better if I took that confidence, blah, blah, blah. I continually could do better. Now, that has gone on all my life.
Yeah.
I bettered myself because I felt I had to, because I felt that I needed to, sorry.
That's all right.
I felt that I needed to prove to myself and others that actually, just because I couldn't get my GCSEs, well, CSEs to be fair, I'm a little bit old. Just because I couldn't get my CSE didn't mean I didn't have a brain.
Yeah.
And I've achieved what I have, although I'm retired now.
Yeah.
At probably around about the age of 50, I probably achieved what I wanted.
Yeah.
But it took me having to fight for what I wanted to do.
Yeah.
Now, okay, I trained as a nursery nurse.
Yeah.
And I carried that through being at a nursery.
Yeah.
I carried that on into school and my physical ability, because I have FM, which is another story. So I worked in a school when I physically couldn't work anymore.
Yeah.
And so much of what you said has run true.
Yeah.
Because I was constantly putting on a show, not a show, I was putting on that mask because I knew how everybody was talking about everybody else. I'm thinking, that's what they think of me.
Don't want them to talk about me like that.
Oh my God.
Yeah.
So and constantly I was told how confident I was. Actually, no.
I know.
I had to be confident because people like you, sorry, and that's a generalisation, and I'm not being general, not really. Because I'm having to fight against my own feelings. Now, none of this thought came into my head until recently. Yeah. Because I suffered greatly. I've suffered with depression since I was 18. Yeah. I've suffered with anxiety, still do, and high stress levels. Yeah. I've gone through quite a bit of late, as my friend knows. And I've actually come to the point now where I'm exhausted. Absolutely exhausted. Yeah. And I have been for probably a couple of years.
Yeah.
And the rest. A couple of years at least. Because I've cared for. I've done the caring for at school, at nursery, at home. I've just lost my father. I've looked after him via care home. I've helped with my little granddaughter, and she is my saviour. If it wasn't for her, although I've got a loving husband, as you clearly have, I don't know what I'd do. Yeah. Because she is my life. Yeah. And still is, and always will be. And you say about getting emotional. I've noticed I always have done, but never thought about it. I've always cried at people's upsets. Yes. I've always cried. I can't watch the news now because what I'm seeing, what I'm hearing is really hurting. Yeah. Really hurting.
It's painful. You feel it, don't you? You actually physically feel it,
You've really made me know. I know of autism through my work, but not deeply.
Yeah.
because my job was LSA last of all. But well, I guess what I'm trying to say is that I don't know where to go now. I don't know what to do because my FM is phenomenal.
Yeah.
And again, you hear so much about people. I've got this, I've got that, I've got something else, and I'm thinking, actually, I have FM.
Yeah.
You don't know what it is. And also, I think I've got a fantastic GP now, the first one I've had in about 50 plus years. But I'm under the whatever of being stressed, anxious.
Yeah.
But I don't think I am. You think?
She's the sort of person who always apologises, always thinks she's lesser than everybody else.
But just to touch on something you said earlier on as well, I was a very small child at school, and when I went to senior school, I very quickly realised, oh shit, I can't be me here. And I put on this bravado. To the point where I slapped a girl in science class and got a nickname of Kung Fu Casey. That was my maiden name. But then, you know, it was just, I was so, my primary school teacher actually said to my two friends that I had at primary school, he asked them to look out for me. So they knew there was something, but you know, that, what was that, 80s, 90s, you know, didn't really know. But I also fell pregnant at 16, and my son's 25 in July, and so I had him when I was 17, and I was so scared of what other people would pigeonhole me as, this single teenage mum. I did everything I could not to be that, what's the word, I can't think of the word. Stereotype, thank you John. That stereotype, I went out and I got a job and I worked really hard, and I did a lot of things that then put me in burnout and made me struggle, and I went to a different job instead, and you know, stuff like that, because I didn't want any more bad labels. So, you know, why is autistic bad? Because actually all these other labels that I've had that I've tried to run from have been the ones that have damaged me. But yeah, thank you for your story. Let's go around the podcast.
Sorry, was that another hand at the back? Go for it.
Actually, but I feel like I'm asking too many questions.
That's fine. That's the point of a Q&A.
Yeah.
So, you know, so with the diagnosis, when you found out, let's say, like you realised that, let's say, you lose keys, or you know, like the things that you struggle with.
Yeah.
So, do you work on strategies then too? Because now you kind of know where. So I'm thinking about it perhaps in a me kind of way of how I approach it. Obviously, you know, my brain might be wired differently, so I'm trying to understand. Like, so I would say, okay, so now this is a challenge. I have these challenges.
Yeah.
And so I'm a believer in CBT, cognitive behavioral therapy. Yeah. So then I would say, okay, I know that I'm not, you know, I struggle with this, so my strategies will be this.
Yeah.
So would you see that as an opportunity in the sense that you've been able to analyze your personality and work with that, and then connected to that, what happens when you don't believe in CBT? Like you, what strategies would you use?
Oh, that's a really good question. It is quite well talked about in the neurodivergent community that CBT doesn't always work with neurodivergent people.
Okay.
So, I mean, I've had various different therapies over the years for different things, and I think if you find a therapist, a good therapist, stick with them, because they will adapt to work with what you need and how you work. And not every therapist that you see on the first time will be the right therapist for you either. I think therapy is great, but it doesn't always have to be done in the same way as it would for a neurotypical person. For me, therapy is quite often just offloading everything that's in my brain, but also the really good therapists that I have are the ones that have been able to actually hold up a mirror to who I am actually as a person, because there's been a lot of ingrained things into my mind about who I am as a person over the years, and it's not all right. And so having them make me realise that I am a good person was probably one of more healing things that's happened in therapy, and I think it's just adapting to that individual person's needs. But yeah, that's kind of that. And with strategies as well, as an adult, when you assess, like, you're quite often asked questions about, can you do this, can you do that? But your immediate answer is yes, but it's only because you've actually put in a series of strategies already, because you had to. Like, I can't be anywhere without my iCalendar. I would forget everything if I didn't have it. It's synced to my phone, it's synced to my iMac, it's synced to my husband's calendar. I have alerts and alarms on any appointment that's in there. If I didn't have all of that, I wouldn't remember. You know, there's a lot of strategies that you put in place, but also it's finding strategies that work for your daughter as well. Because this Apple Watch is not actually mine. My watch is in there for a new battery fixing, and this is my daughter's that my husband spent however much money on to try and help organise her for college, and she never wore it. That strategy, we tried, didn't work for her. So that, you know, it's just experimenting and finding out what works, and listening to them as well if something's not working, and trying a different angle.
It's the old adage, if you've met one autistic person.
Yeah, you've met one autistic person.
Yes, please.
As I believe I'm neurotypical, how can we help people who are neurodivergent? I've read novels about it and that sort of thing, but not serious stuff. But they seem to need more space and quiet. Is that how you find it? I mean, if you're having a bad day, do you want to just hide away? Do we talk to you? Do we give you space? What do we do?
Spatension.
Sorry?
Spatension. Space and attention.
I see.
So, and this is just for me. So, like, I need space. I need some quiet. You know, we've got 2 daughters at home. It can get quite noisy, especially when the 8-year-old ADHD is bouncing off the yoga ball, watching the most annoying cartoons in the living room. And I will need to go upstairs. Or if I've had something really emotionally overwhelming, I will go upstairs. But I also need to know that you still care. And so, James will come up and he'll annoy me for a little bit. Give me a cuddle that normally ends up with like jabby poke or whatever, but he would, you know, do you want a cup of tea, and then go off again, or, you know, see if I need a cuddle. So I need space, but I also need to know that you care, and I call that spatension.
Thank you.
In one of the prose chapters in the book RSD and Me, you describe how even the smallest instances of rejection have a deep impact on you. Now, I personally can't count the number of times I've been told things like, just toughen up, or don't let it bother you, or you need to be thicker skinned. And so I was wondering if you could just take the opportunity to, what is rejection sensitivity dysphoria, which is the RSD of that title? Are neurodivergent people thinner skinned than neurotypical people? Can or should they toughen up as they are told to? And how do we balance the need to make things safe with the need to build and grow resilience and strength?
Okay.
And see how that kind of fits together.
So, resilience. That's what's the word I get really annoyed with. Just because it's something that the schools often sort of say. We did some parent-led therapy for my youngest because her anxiety was so bad in the first session that they were like, it's going to cause her more anxiety to do this. So we did a course, and there was a lot of talk about resilience and like building up doing things that made her uncomfortable to make her more resilient. And I was just like, I'm kind of uncomfortable with that. Like, why put her in a position, you know, I think it's healthy to have boundaries and understanding of what you can and cannot deal with. The rejection sensitivity side of it, I think RSD is one thing that I probably struggle with the most. Like, if someone said, what cripples you the most about your ADHD, I'd say, like, the RSD, because it's just shit. Like, you know, you can have an interaction and it can just play on your mind for such a long time. And it's funny because my sister's currently in a new job, and she'll phone me in a lunch break like, I've just done this, and I'm like, this is your RSD talking. Like, she's not saying that to you, she's saying this, but your RSD is taking it completely out of context. And they love her. She's just had her appraisal, and they're like, excellent all across the board. I'm like, see? But like, just for instance, I try to reach out for help, which is really hard, for my surgery next week, and ask one of the Forest School mums if she could just be a backup plan if I can't sort a lift out for my daughter. And she couldn't. And it took me quite a lot of courage to ask her in the first place. And then I just felt like crap. I was like, oh God, she must have thought I was such a weirdo asking someone I don't really know that well for help for a lift. And you know, I overthought it for quite a while. I ended up actually having a meltdown that evening because it was a you know, plethora of things that had sort of caused that. But it's perceived rejection as well. It could just be that person's tone of voice didn't quite sound right, and now I feel like they don't love me anymore. Or you know, it can be that dramatic. I mean, you're quite fortunate you don't have hormones, mate, because RSD and the luteal phase of your cycle is the biggest shitstorm you ever have to deal with. It's horrible. Sorry, excuse my French. It's awful. And it's like, you want to run away to the forest. You think you need a divorce. You think this, you think that, and then the period comes, you're like, oh, okay, it's fine. So yeah, so RSD is horrible. Hate it. It sucks.
Okay.
I don't think we need thicker skin. I've got thick skin about a lot of things, but I think our sensitivities to the world and creatures and the things around us actually is what makes us decent human beings.
Nicely put. The one at the back hasn't asked a question yet. Go for it.
Just what are your thoughts on the autism is actually a form of human evolution?
I would agree with it. I need to do more research on that one, but I do think that if there wasn't autistic, ADHD, neurodivergent minds in this world, the world would be even shitter than it currently is, because we are the creative thinkers, we're the people that bring more humanity to a lot of things. I'm not saying neurotypicals aren't humans, I'm not saying that, but I think, you know, the world would be really boring if we were all neurotypical, wouldn't it?
Yeah.
And so I do think it is part of evolution in a way. Has anyone heard the canary in the mine sort of saying about it? Like,
Yes.
because neurotypicals are now claiming that, claims the word, that they're feeling burnout with the current state of the world. You know, the wars, the economy, the, you know, state of the systems. But the neurodivergents have been saying it for longer, like we're the canaries in the mine, like we saw this coming, we're struggling with it, we were burnt out back here. So if we're bad, you know it's going to sort of filter through to everybody else eventually. So yeah.
Please, everyone join me in thanking you. Absolutely splendid. And also, ladies and gentlemen, we will be at the back of the room with books for sale.
Oh yeah, I forgot about that bit.